learning. We spend a lot of time and money and energy in school systems pre-K through age 21. And then we send people out into the real world without mentorship, without guidance, in a world where growing remote culture of work. How are people supposed to continue to learn and grow? And so vPeer was actually birthed in the Harvard iLab. And when I came back to Chicago, of course, I was working, I put it on the shelf and I put it away. Kids, family, all the other responsibilities. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I took it off the shelf because I kept hearing that problem over and over again. Remote culture, lack of mentorship, how do we grow? And vPeer is a virtual peer platform so that networks can connect people with each other across cities, nations, and the world. And we can actually grow together in our profession and in our lives. So exciting times, there's lots to happen. So for those of you who may not have all the privileges others have, if you do, that's great. If you don't, that's also great, because your drive and God's grace can also take us a long way.
Great, thanks so much for sharing that. And Manny, do you mind also just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Hamtramck in Detroit, middle of 7. My parents immigrated from Syria in the 80s. And, you know, like many immigrant families, first kid comes along, second kid comes along, you plan to go back, right? 7 kids later, you're not really going anywhere. And one of the things that was sort of key in terms of my personal trajectory was when my parents finally made a plan to relocate, and they bought their one-way ticket, except it happened that the day of our flight back was 9/11. And so we actually never ended up relocating. And I remember thinking to myself that I'm in a unique position here in the US. I mean, the opportunities I have. And that led me to discover social work, which took me to crowdfunding, which took me to LaunchGood, which we'll talk about in a bit in terms of the second set of questions.
Awesome, thank you so much. Last but not least, Aman and Komal, do you mind just speaking up a little about yourself?
Yes. Salam, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor, and it's so cool that women are rising to do this, and also Muslims are showing what our greatness is too. So truth be told, I'm not even supposed to be here. Let me explain. So as the daughter of South Asian immigrant parents, Pakistani parents, I had 4 very distinct career options laid out for me from an early age: doctor, lawyer, engineer, or complete failure. While I always wanted to be a Bollywood actress. As you'll come to find, I ended up doing something far more realistic, like solving world hunger. And so my journey began when I was a senior at Berkeley. I was a few months away from taking my commission as an officer in the United States Navy. And so I'm walking down Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley when I encountered a homeless man who was begging for food. You know, most people beg for money, but he was begging for food, and that really compelled me to stop and invite him to join me for lunch. And during lunch, he sat across from me, just wolfing down his food. So he was unbelievably hungry. It wasn't a ploy for anything else. And in between bites, he shared his story. He said, "My name is John. I just came back from my second tour in Iraq. I've been waiting weeks for my military benefits to kick in. And because they haven't, I haven't eaten in 3 days." And this really hit home for me. And this is a veteran, someone who would give the most selfless sacrifice for his country, only to come home to face yet another battle, that of hunger. And then adding insult to injury, right across the street, Berkeley's dining hall is throwing away thousands of pounds of perfectly edible food. And so it's this very stark reality of those who have and waste, and those who are in need and starve, and those 2 people literally right across the street from one another. And what I realized that this is emblematic of a much larger problem, and that's that we waste over 365 million pounds of perfectly edible food every single day. And to wrap your head around that number, if you imagine the world's largest football stadium filled to its absolute brim, not with last night's tikka masala or this morning's half croissant, but untouched, unopened, perfectly edible food. That's how much food goes wasted every single day in America. And it costs US businesses over $218 billion, all of this food waste. And if food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of methane after the US and China. So there's a massive economic cost. There's this huge environmental impact, not to mention in some of the wealthiest cities in America, 1 in 4 don't know where their next meal is coming from. So clearly not a lack of food that's the issue, rather an ineffective distribution of that food, meaning that hunger is not a scarcity problem, it's a logistics problem. And solving this logistics problem, bridging the gap between, resolving the disparity between excess and access to food has become my life's mission and Copia's purpose. So yeah, I'll pause there.
Great, thank you so much for that. Aman, would you like to speak?
Sure, thank you. It's just incredibly honored to be here among such, powerhouses today. And thank you to both Muppies and Muslim Women in Technology. Very different paths. Sorry, I think someone accidentally muted me. Grew up in Pakistan in Lahore and moved to the US for grad school at MIT. And I struggled with a lot of self-doubt through my years in undergrad. Again, woman, a lot of the classes, I was the only female in the entire room. Computer security classes, I'd have my little corner in there where I'd sit and then there was the rest of the class. So never really saw like myself as a Muslim minority back then, but more just being female in tech in Pakistan. But we used to have a lot of, startup events like Lahore Startup Weekend. And I always kind of felt the need to participate. And I did. And there were a few times where I ended up, winning the first 3 prizes or whatever. But none of the ideas stuck around for too long. Well, A, my team would disappear and go off for their PhD programs. But then B, also that I felt that there wasn't anything that was holding me or helping me push me forward. I also felt that, while in undergrad, most of the boys would say, this stuff, the presentation part, Aman will take care of, and we'll focus on the engineering bit, on the coding bit. And as a result, I just became so attuned to doing that I started losing faith in my own skills. And then one of my professors from LUMS, he pushed me to apply to grad school. Never thought I'd get in. I was like, well, worst case, he'll feel bad for me when I don't, and he'll hire me as a researcher. But ended up getting into MIT, and there, in my program, technology and policy, there were people from like science backgrounds, environmental engineering, biological engineering, everywhere, right? And I ended up being the only person in the room who knew how to code. So now, the stakes were different. I started coding. I think I started getting some of my confidence back. And then eventually ended up in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. And like Komal mentioned about the food issue, so many homeless people. And it bugged me that companies weren't doing enough. I was like, well, we have all the money in the world here, which, the Bay Area itself could be its own economy, a huge economy. Okay, yeah. So that really bothered me, and I felt helpless. Didn't realize what I could do about it. And fast forward to being in data engineering in California, doing that for Al Jazeera initially, and then eventually leading data engineering and business intelligence at Docker. And then moved to Toronto last year. Well, immigration issues, it's not that easy to become an immigrant or get a green card in the US now as it was in the 80s, for instance. But ended up picking the Canadian route last year and moved to Toronto. And then I got a call from Majid, who's also on Zoom right now today. And he was like, I'm looking for like a co-founder for the sustainability startup. And we're thinking about ESG. Now, ESG was a new term for me. It's environment, social, and governance. Essentially, it's data that a lot of public companies now report on with regards to, let's say, when we talk about diversity, like Amani mentioned, or we talk about things like, carbon footprint. And you want this, so these companies now becoming more and more open about it. But Majid's idea was interesting. He was like, we want private companies, privately held companies, and their investors to be able to kind of give us this data and to be able to do analytics on it. I spent a week kind of thinking about it, and I was like, well, I have a few people in mind that you can go to. But he was like, I'm interested in you kind of helping out. Now, I had always been kind of interested in the entrepreneurship space, but never really thought that I would have it in me. So I was like, Amari, this sounds great. I'll give it a shot. Let's try it out for 3 months. And, if I can continue, let's do that. So lo and behold, now we're ESG3. We're relatively new, about a year old. We incubated within the Velocity Incubator at the University of Waterloo. Majid is a PhD student there. So that's how we got our initial startup seed fund. And now we're trying to help privately held companies report on, diversity, on all of this data. And now I feel like everything that I've been doing all my life, being gravitated towards clean energy and different things and making the world a better place, what, better than to have these companies becoming more accountable and and sharing that with the rest of the world and helping them do that. So I feel that I found this particular niche that I really, really want to kind of explore more and kind of delve into. So I think I continue sharing more. I stop now, but I will share more about, what the journey is like and what we're doing with ESG3.
That's fantastic. Thank you all for sharing some of that information about your journeys. The next thing we want to dive into is, and you could keep your answers, it doesn't have to be too long. It could be 1 minute long or less. When you create a startup, and in your specific cases, was it a passion related to a certain problem that you solved? Or was it more you did this extreme technical analysis of seeing opportunities in the market, and then you kind of decided like, okay, this is the way to go. This is what will be most profitable. And then when you made that choice, what I'm imagining is there an alternate reality where like Amani is the one who launches the automotive, self-driving car software related company, and Qasar is the one who's in the, crowdfunding space. So what were the ideas that you decided not to pursue? And kind of what was your logic going through that, or passion going through that? And you could keep the answers to about 1 minute. And we'll start off with Amani first.
Yeah, that's a great question. In my case, and at least in our case, I was a grassroots fundraiser, and this was 10 years ago. So you have to remember, crowdfunding wasn't like it is today, right? And I remember thinking at the time, there were sort of two sentiments. One, I think the sentiment for majority of the Muslim community was that we felt that we were so tired of defending who we are that we couldn't just build, because when you're constantly defending, it's distracting. And so we wanted to build a platform to really change that narrative around Muslims. But then practically speaking, we always needed funds for any project we were working on. I mean, the Muslim community is fundraising all the time. And we thought to ourselves that there's 1.6 billion Muslims at the time, 400 niche sites. Why isn't there anything uniquely built to the Muslim community? So that was really the idea behind creating LaunchGood, to one, really help Muslims who we felt like we lost our mojo, bring that back for the community and inspire us, whether it's raising funds for Black churches burned out in the South, or the first hijab ballerina, or healthcare clinics for uninsured Americans. And then each story then told, each chapter and each campaign on LaunchGood became this global storybook. Now, what we didn't decide to pursue, of course, was we tried the in-person fundraising model. So we had this idea where, okay, we've all been to these fundraising dinners, right? We did pursue that for some time, but we wanted to completely go digital. It just was not worth it. It didn't make sense for us. And it wasn't actually fun. I mean, we were trying to avoid that in the first place. So why create the same technology that would support that?
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Next, can we have Komal kind of speak to that alternate reality scenario, and then Aman after that?
I guess, what do you mean by alternate reality?
So when you were coming up with your idea, what were the ideas that you decided not to pursue? And then what was kind of the reasoning behind that?
Well, I decided not to pursue being a doctor in the United States Navy. So, and my parents were not particularly happy about that. My dad said, Komal, I took you out of poverty and now you want to go live in poverty. Like, what was the point of, Berkeley, going to Berkeley? So I think that I had a very, very planned out life, and absolutely nothing worked according to plan, which my dreams weren't as big as my reality is now. So but I'm happy to answer any other question that might be more fruitful for the audience, particularly about passion. You let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned in your story kind of where the passion came from, that scenario that happened that kind of drove kind of the vision for the company. And then I guess you can jump in to kind of talk about.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, go for it. And you can jump in as well and talk about kind of your journey of deciding on an idea and kind of, how you evaluated it. Was it more emotion and passion driven that this is something that needs to be solved? Or was it kind of looking at the opportunity of what's out there and what's profitable?
Yes, I think I can go ahead. I think COVID has been like the biggest driver to kind of push me more towards this. So in an alternative scenario with COVID involved, I'd probably still stick with this. Thing is, we're moving from like a shareholder kind of based economy to more kind of stakeholder based capitalism, where now companies, I think Deloitte recently had their 2020 millennial survey where they mentioned that 63% of millennials care more about business doing social impact and changing communities as opposed to making profits. That's a huge change in the way we're changing economies. Now economies will now kind of focus more on how the business is impacting that. So when I think about Copia, when I think about food, I want companies to be able to say, well, we've reduced food wastage, this is how we're contributing, this is how we've improved our diversity, because now your investor, your millennials, Gen Z, everyone is caring more about that. Your employees are caring more about these things, because now with more job losses and businesses changing, it's people are becoming more empathetic towards the problems of others. And I think that's the empathy that was needed, the impetus to kind of push businesses forward into doing this. So, and then generally just thinking about like alternative reality, I had always had these ideas that I would shut down very quickly. I'm my strongest critic. I think I needed someone else to give me the domain and find me that, that niche that I wanted to operate in, and I would bring in the technology to it. So past 10 years, I've just been looking for that niche, and I think I finally found it, whether it's with ESG Tree or it's with something else within the sustainability space. Because if you're trying to help companies become more and more accountable to these things, that's your source. That's how you're trying to go into impact the world on a larger scale. So I'm hoping, these efforts are going to play a part, but at the moment, I can't really think of anywhere else I would rather be right now.
I mean, on the beach in Costa Rica wouldn't be terrible. Just saying.
Fair point. That would be nice though, Komal.
Wow, that's major. I mean, there's that opportunity cost, right, associated with pursuing an alternate profession. Qasar or Dilara, can each of you kind of talk to your journey of choosing, your startup idea and that motivation?
Sure. And Komal, I'm going to say we may be on the beach in Costa Rica. How much you want to bet we'd still be on our laptops doing this work?
And then I'd get back in the water.
Because, Siddiq, you asked about, was it passion or was it technical analysis? And what I think it is, it has to be both. It absolutely has to be both. My passion, and you can tell from, if you look on my LinkedIn or anything else, was how do we create lifelong learning? How do we help ourselves meet our potential? The question of how do people learn was something I'm passionate about trying to understand. But you got to do an analysis to see how you can make that into a product, right? And the analysis of what we did is we looked at, okay, what exists out there that people are using in droves for this type of potentially professional learning and growth, or what opportunities for mentorship and connections. And really what we saw out there were things like WhatsApp and Facebook pages, which were the quick and dirty way to get, like, you have an alumni program, you have a network, get them on WhatsApp, have them just talking to each other. And you know what? Let them figure out how to do the rest of it. Or in the professional world, you had Microsoft Teams, or you had other professional software where it was a toolbox of you could meet visually, and you could also chat, and you could also learn from each other. The problem with the first one, with WhatsApp, was like people got engrossed in it. It was bombarding you with information, but not really connecting you to professional growth. It was really not making you better. It was just making you busier. And then you have Microsoft Teams and the others, which, like, let's be honest, 9 to 5, I'll be on that, but I don't want to be connecting on that with people and colleagues after the workday. So what existed in the middle? What allowed you to chat with professional colleagues? What allows you to still video integrate the way that you connect? What gives you an algorithm so that you could do one-on-one mentoring, find that person and do one-on-one mentoring, all within a network that you might already be part of? And that's what we built because of the analysis we did. So there's a passion for how do people learn, but an analysis of what would be the platform that would help them do that. And you got to have both.
I think for me, it was, I mean, obviously this is my third company, so each of them are slightly different. My first company actually was in crowdfunding. So I know that model well. It was just in nothing like Launch Good though. Much more like Kickstarter. In terms of passion versus methodical analysis, I mean, certainly for this third company that I'm doing, it was methodical analysis. I mean, we very much, me and my co-founder, who's somebody I work with at Google, also from Michigan. Of all the random coincidences in the world, we grew up in the same subdivision. And so we worked together at Google, and we talked a lot about starting a company together before I was even at YC. And we kept the conversation going, and we saw an opportunity and we executed against it. I mean, it's pretty it's that straightforward, much more the MBA approach than the first and second companies, which were, I would say, more random. They weren't completely random, and they were based on areas of interest and areas we thought the market, needed. But I think this third one was the most mechanical. I mean, we really assessed the market. We really figured out where, what the product would be, how much it would be priced for, what type of engineers would be required to build it, and how to go to market. So much more mechanical. I think in terms of, if you look at the way software startups specifically, it doesn't apply to all businesses or doesn't apply to, all types of organizations, but specifically private software companies in the Bay Area, they are somewhat mechanical in the sense of it's not a coincidence that, a handful of funds get this significant returns again and again and again. If it was random, the returns would be randomly distributed. And I think I don't know if the stat is true today, but about I don't know, 7 to 8 years ago, Sequoia was something like 17% of the NASDAQ were Sequoia funded companies, like some huge amount, like 1 out of 5 companies, which is this is a fund with 10 general partners, kind of shocking. So there is a repeatability. So if you're talking not about all organizations and all types of initiatives and goals, but specifically private software companies, I think, being in the Bay Area and approaching it almost like more formulaically does generally result in better outcomes. But, and I've always just been a believer in, I think the companies that end up doing the best, again, within that constraint, are ones that are very, very market oriented. And the way that some folks will say that they're customer oriented, or they really care about their users, but it all means the same thing. Whoever is going to consume the thing that you're making really wants the thing that you're making. And so we kept that in the forefront, and we still do, the forefront of our minds. YC has this great motto to make something people want. And I think that, that's been a big driver for us as well.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful insight. Kind of want to pivot into another category. We're all minorities here, so I just want to talk to you guys. It's no secret that there are specific challenges that minorities face, whether it's funding, access to resources. According to a study done by Diversity VC, 77.1% of startup founders are white males. So I'm just curious, what has been your guys' personal experience with that, and specific challenges that you faced, or maybe you didn't face, you thought you would face, you had the right resources. I guess maybe Qasar, we can start off with you, and then Dr. Delar, but were there any specific challenges that you faced early on in starting your career that you weren't expecting due to being a minority? Any trouble accessing resources, and how you kind of overcame that?
Yeah, I mean, I continue to believe that, socioeconomic factors are as significant as anything else. So I think if you're poor and you grow up in poor communities and you grow up without role models, it's very, very difficult to break out of that cycle. And that's, I think, continues to be the case today in 2020. And so, I've done Muppies talks before at YC, including at YC. And I think the key thing for folks who are earlier in their career or in high school, within the Muslim community specifically, is to see role models. I think if you grow up, let's say you grew up in the Bay Area and your parents went to Stanford and they started a software company, it doesn't seem that crazy to then start a software company and go to Stanford. But if you don't have that leap ends up becoming much, much more significant. And I think that seems, at least from my, limited experience, and, that seems to be the big issue. And one of my, I would say one of the downsides of actually me leaving YC was, I think I can't be that role, and actively funding folks who are like me, and pushing for those folks, especially when they're on the edge of should we fund this person or not? And I think I almost got a certain level of stereotype where I would always push people through who are similar to my background, or Muslim or something like this. But I think you need to have those folks. Now, if you look at venture funds in the Bay Area specifically, all the major funds specifically have Pakistanis, forget Muslims, but just Pakistanis specifically. So I think there are members of our communities, that are making it into it. The gender balance is still, significantly off. But there are people in our communities that are making it into these positions and having influence. But I think that's only one part of it. The larger part is accessible role models in all of our communities. I think, I still don't see that, even though there's a huge community in Michigan, you still see very few entrepreneurs in the way we're talking about entrepreneurship, which is high growth companies. See lots of small businesses like my parents or things like that. But I think that role modeling seems to be missing still. And I think that just takes time. I think that just takes time. And I think us doing events like this and continuing to push each other, I think is probably the tactical thing we can do in the immediate term.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I know I for myself, like I think a lot of Muslim people get mystified when they see really successful Muslim people in these spaces. They're like, how did they do it? Like, it seems not like magic, but like people think it's like a special case that happened. So it's really good to normalize the conversation that it is possible, and there is a disadvantage for people who don't have special like privileges to get them there, but definitely important to see people doing those things. Dr. Delara, did you also find that you had a similar experience kind of starting a VP out? How was your experience getting like funding?
So the data tells us that 75% of successful people say that they needed thought partners to help them be successful. The other 25% don't say they didn't need it. The other 25% say they couldn't find them, right? And that's what we've got to change. And we dig into who those 25% are that often couldn't find thought partners or supporters or early investors. It's people of color, women, or people from low-income backgrounds. All of us meet one of those three criteria, and I'm 3 for 3. And so, the challenges obviously are there. And often, I'm in a room, and if we're talking product market fit or we're talking growth, those are conversations that people like me don't have, like people who look like us don't have often. And so when we do, there's an element of surprise. There's absolutely an element of tell me more, I'd want to hear more. And then there's an interest in the product. So flip it, use it to our advantage. We will have the surprise. And so, yes, they're huge challenges. But it's going to be a world of challenges moving forward, ladies and gentlemen. This is 2020 and the world looks completely unknown in the future. So we started off saying we're risk embracers. We're going to have to embrace risk.
That's a great point. Komal, Aman, Imani, did you want to add any concluding thoughts before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I can jump in. So we had this issue when we were starting LaunchKit. We needed seed funding, and so we thought the only way to do it was to head to the Bay Area. Even though our fundraising platform, we're actually terrible at our own fundraising. After 2 trips, we raised $0. And so we ended up bootstrapping it from an angel investor with $10,000 and grew it to where it is today. But I think the incredible thing that I've seen over the last 5 years is that you have seen a lot of companies starting to now invest in Muslim majority markets. So whether it's Muzmatch that looks at dating apps, or Hot Hijab, or even Wahed Invest, I think the space is changing. I mean, some of these companies within the last 5 years have gotten seed funding between 2 to 7 million. So it's slightly changing. We didn't have it when we started, but in retrospect, bootstrapping it was like the best decision we actually had made.
Great. Awesome. Aman, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with everyone. And Qasar, your points, those resonate with me a lot. Never had like a female role model who had like gone for grad school in computer science, done the entrepreneurial journey. So for me, it's something I've struggled with a lot, and that's definitely something there. But I think now I have a more optimistic view as I see Muslim women technology and other such organizations pop up over the past 2-3 years. Just the power of mutual visibility, it just helps you so much. And now when you have an idea, you go to these Facebook groups, you put your idea out there, ask people to kind of test it out, give you feedback. I feel we're now becoming a force to reckon with, and it's great. And I'm hugely optimistic, but I didn't see any of this when I moved to the US a few years ago. So I really think we're changing for the better, but really depends on the power of the numbers and, the networking, as Sadiq said at the beginning, super important is to be able to networking and make time for others. If you see, like, I've been super surprised by all the effort that people are putting supporting to now to help me make connections with others. There's always this kind of thing. I feel that whenever I meet someone new, they're trying to figure me out, and you can sense those 10-15 minutes that they're trying to get rid of their preconceived notions, trying to figure me out as a person, who I am, what my story is. But I think for me, humor has really helped. CFO I've been talking to for the past few months and working with, he said, Aman, I love how you add levity to things. And that just kind of gives you so much trust. And we feel that, it's just so much easier because you're relatable. And I feel like I have to put in an effort there as well. There's this effort I need to make with everyone, starting off, just to kind of make sure that, we're on a level playing ground. You don't have to feel like I'm this triple diversity candidate or whatever you're talking to, but there's that effort involved in there. But I think, pushing barriers out there, and I feel we're in a good position now, and COVID generally is helping because now there's more visibility everywhere.
So you talked about trouble accessing resources and specific challenges, right? That was your question. So one, I think I have inherently an immigrant hustle, right? I saw my mom working 3 jobs when I was growing up. So like I knew that it took a lot of effort to do a great amount of good. That being said, I think this recent stat is that I think less than 3% of female founded companies have received funding. And then less than 0.02% of that 3% goes to women that look like me, or to any of the women here, right? So it is against all odds that I made it this far. I was a solo, first-time, non-technical, female, minority founder. I was trying to make a for-profit company from taking leftover food and giving it to poor people. Like there was just, it was everything, every single odd was stacked against me. And the turning point for me was actually in November 2015 when we got into YC. And so full disclosure, Qasar and we had another group partner, Jared, were our group partners. And getting into YC was like game changer. It was like, if one just from the, like, if they believe in me, I believe in me, and like, let's do this. And, I remember the night we got in, actually, Jared emailed me and said, we have a lot of companies at YC that do a lot of good. We have a couple nonprofits we have a lot of companies at YC that make a lot of money. We have a couple nonprofits that do a lot of good. You are going to be our first company that is both going to make a lot of money and do a lot of good. And we're so excited to have you. Welcome to YC. And, I think so many people have varying experiences at YC. For me, I got more out of those like concentrated period of time than I did at 4 years at Berkeley, that I did literally doing anything else. Because it is this like maniacal focus that they make you have of like, talking to your users, of not hiring, of just focusing on like finding product market fit. And then being surrounded by founders, I think is it's an infectious thing, right? They bleed like the same blood that I do in some ways. And not all founders are made the same, but it was really great also to have that accountability. Every other week you have an accountability either to your group partners one week, and then the next week is to like your group itself, to other founders. And, having to present like these numbers that you said you were going to hit 2 weeks ago, like them holding you accountable, you publicly having to do this, it makes all of the difference. And, you also have this concentrated period of time where like nothing else matters. Like they tell you, it doesn't matter if you're a wife or girlfriend, like everything is on pause. All you do is you work on your company. And getting into YC was the game changer, not only because it helped me think in that particular way. Even how I pitched the company, and we are a for-profit company, we're a venture-backed company. And again, how do you convince people like bloodthirsty venture capitalists to invest in a company with a founder that is like me and a company that is doing like what we're doing? And so that was definitely a challenge. But Y Combinator, and particularly Qasar, actually, so it was actually 12:45 in the morning. He had just recently had his first kid. And people like the 2 weeks before demo day, which is like, that's like D-Day for us. People are at YC's headquarters. They're there all day long, like into like 2, 3 in the morning. And he was about to leave. And I had like presented to a lot of the group partners. And I was like, hey, do you mind? He's on his way out. I was like, do you mind listening to mine? And he's like, sure. But then I gotta go. And I was like, fine. And then he does it. He like rips it apart. And it was like, he was like, you got to cut this, you got to do this way. Like, and we spent the next hour just like working on that. And it was like, it was so awesome. One, that like you have those kind of mentors and those people around you who want you to be wildly successful. Like YC is a very founder friendly organization. And then also like Qasar is no bullshit. Like he will rip you a new way, like it does not matter. And he has plenty of times, but he also like thinks about it so differently and in such a, like in a way that I would never have even thought about it. And I think that's what you get at YC. You get a whole like group partners that are like the best of the best in their field. And so all of that to say, that was a very critical, pivotal moment in our journey, in my journey.
I try not to be mean. I really do.
It's not about meanness, right? It's not about meanness. It's about realness. It's about, and like,
I mean, we have limited time, so I tend to say what's on my mind rather than like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was so much better. And like, you are going in front of, again, like 1,000+ venture capitalists, and like, how do you tell your story? Like, this is my opportunity to be in a room of this many people, and I have to, in less than 3 minutes, convince them why they should put millions of dollars in my company, right? And so like, how you say it, what you say, the confidence in which you say it, like to have that unapologetic certainty, yeah, it takes practice. And also, one of the things that Qasar, one of the best pieces of advice that Qasar gave me was like, don't confuse movement with progress, right? Like it's so easy to do busy work and think like you're accomplishing all of this stuff, but if you're not making like, it doesn't matter how fast you're going if you're going in the wrong direction, right? So those are two different points, but the meaning is the same or similar.
Yeah, I think that's so vital. And just a quick anecdote about the inspiration role models. I teach class on American Islamic history to some kids, and I made you all the research topics for our most recent class. And I can't tell you how the girls in the class, how their faces lit up when they saw Komal-Ahmad, president of XYZ, Aman Rahman, Docker, data engineering, piping. Like, I've never seen them so genuinely excited. And so it's such a real point, and I've seen it myself. So thank you all for being here. I'm sure you'll inspire the next generation. Moving on to another topic of, Komal mentioned she was a solo founder. So I was wondering what all your thoughts were and what your journey was of founding your co-founder. Was there like a personality match? Was there a skill set match, education, backgrounds? Is there a formulaic approach to take, or is it kind of just a more art than science? And then any feedback you have there about your journey finding a partner or not having a partner. And we could start off with Dilara, and then Komal, and then Aman.
I'm going to talk about co-founder, because others will as well, but I'd actually like to focus on the first part of your team. The first people that join your team are so critical, right? And there is a fabulous YouTube video called Dancing Crazy Guy. Some of you may know about it. It's a lesson on first followers, which is, and I believe this, just as important as a leader. Right? If you don't have the first followers, if you don't have those who are willing to believe in your mission, invest time, invest energy, get paid so little, because that's unfortunately the life of a bootstrap startup, and then to grow it together. And the key here, it's a 2-minute video, and you can Google it and see it later on YouTube. But the key here is build that people team, the people power through one, people who get your vision, right? We have a collective vision, a collective goal. We don't have to have the same way to get there. In fact, we shouldn't have the exact same way to get there, because diversity on that leadership and initial team is really critical too, to disagree with each other and then to come up with a better solution together. So one, that vision. Two, someone who really is willing to be a thinker and to solve some of those problems. And so when we started, we were looking, I was looking for a co-founder, and I think someone said to me, stop looking and just get to know people. Stop looking for the co-founder and get to know people who you're talking to and have this vision with you. And our first team was James Hassan, an amazing developer, Subhan Ashrafi, a young man who really was hungry about furthering the mentoring and the opportunity for algorithms for mentoring that we wanted to do. And then a young woman named Kimmy from college, whose network is on vPeer, and then wanted to work for vPeer, right? So that's awesome when someone's network's on here and then they're like, I want to work for the company. And so these are the kinds of people that make the difference, right? So these are the people who will rock everything from your social media presence to your vision to bringing more networks onto this platform. So Muslim, not Muslim, old, young, tall, short, all of that doesn't matter, but look for vision and look for people who are thinkers and problem solvers.
Yeah, for me, so many people were like, oh my gosh, isn't it so hard to do this like by yourself? Like it's hard. Like, I don't know any other way, And yeah, I mean, I think it actually, so I had a co-founder just by name, and he quit the day before we started YC. And I was like, oh my God, YC's gonna kick us out. Like, he's not here. Like, this is now I'm by myself, like blah, blah, blah. And it was the best thing that happened. Like, I can't even imagine that we would be this far if that had happened. And so doing this by myself, is it hard? Yeah, it's hard. But I think this is what I am shameless about asking people for help. I'm shameless. Like, I don't care if you think I look stupid. I don't care. I don't care if I sound stupid. I don't know this answer and you do. So like, I'm gonna get this answer. And so like leveraging that community, I of course needed more support, of course needed more mentorship, because also I'm doing something for the first time, right? Like literally building something from the ground up for the first time that hasn't existed before, that is such a critical human need. And so, yeah, I guess I'm sure it is really great, but just like a single mother can raise children and they can be fantastic. They can be the LeBrons of the world. You can also have solo founders that can exist, though rare.
I can go next. Yeah, Dr. Dilar, I love what you said as well about the team. I mean, this might sound very cliched, but I think you really need to know yourself first to know what you need in a co-founder and have a complementary skill set. So for instance, I know I'm a terrible procrastinator, which is why it's taken me 10 years to have my own business and how I shoot down my ideas all the time. So I knew whoever my co-founder would need to be able to kind of get me out of that and push me into doing work. And what I've seen with Majid is the way he gets work done out of people is incredible. So he pushes me to work, I'm accountable to him, so I know I'm going to put in the effort. And then I think also just emotional resiliency. You want to be able to see in that person that you're able to be transparent with them. You can communicate with them in a way that it won't offend them. They're not going to take it personally. And you're going to be transparent throughout. I think that's been super helpful because I can say what's on my mind without feeling apologetic about it. That radical candor is essential because, now that, the business is growing, we're trying to figure out what to do, where to go, having that shared value system, we're like, well, what if this doesn't work? Well, we'll spin up something new for sustainability as long as we have the shared vision that this is where we want to be and this is how we want to grow. And whether it's about acquisition potentially or a merger or whatever, that can all come later as long as we're aligned on the core value of the business and where we want to go. But generally just looking for someone who's well, for the lack of a better word, who is able to take your shit in a sense that they know they won't react, because I've seen some really bad interactions with co-founders where people just get very impulsive and take things personally, and that's the end of the business. Or then there's a really bad legal fight on copyright or whatever and like patents. So just having that and then having the legal structures in place, I think has also been very helpful. So having the structures in place, even if you know each other personally, you're the best of friends, but setting things down legally, having like a mediator in between, so if things were to go wrong, we trust this one person who we both know to be able to sort out any differences that we might have. So we're planning for that. So just in case we ever end up hitting that wall, we have the right safeguards in place. So I think those are some of the things that I've been thinking long and hard about recently.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add to that, to Kamal's point, it's very hard to be a single founder. They say 1+1 is not 2, it's 11. I'm lucky in that I have 2 co-founders. And it kind of happened organically. We worked with each other for at least a year before we called it official, right? Where we said, okay, let's restructure the company. Let's set it up in this way. But in many cases, it's a marriage. I got married after my startup, and I remember thinking to myself, this looks really familiar when it came to just the debates you have about money, when it comes to debates about how you want to raise children or just the strategy. But I would just add one thing is look for people who, yes, complement your skill sets, but also they have good character. And sometimes you don't know that till you work with someone for at least a year or two. For me, Chris and Omar just inherently are good people. And so that's not enough, of course. You've got to have that plus the legal breakdown, because we've been in cases where sometimes expectations aren't aligned. People have a long-term vision and you have a short-term vision. But all of those things, I think, together work, and thinking of it like a marriage really helps. There's a lot in common there when it comes to just the way you navigate decisions. I think another thing I would say is just understand your risk appetites, right? You have a personal risk appetite. You can have a risk appetite for yourself personally, but for your company, it's a different level, or they can be the same, or they can be different. And I think understanding that, so you're kind of, where people are coming from, right? When you decide on certain things about how much your runway is going to be, or how much cash you're comfortable with in the bank, or the kind of risks that you're willing to take, or how long you're going to bootstrap it for. Having those kind of conversations to understand, like, okay, we're hitting a threshold where this is starting to become very uncomfortable for you or not, I think is also a really critical piece. And relationships books help a lot, actually, believe it or not, when it comes to some of this stuff, because it really is a marriage in so many ways, in so many meanings of the word.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. Before we go to Q&A, just wanted to ask one final question to the panelists. And I think, there's kind of this stigma around startups. It's not a part-time job. It's not a full-time job. It's all encompassing. You're working all hours of the day. It's a long haul. And I guess I wanted to ask you guys, like, how have you prevented burnout or just general like balance of your other interests? How have you managed that? And kind of just share any advice for people if they're going through with an idea. Maybe Qasar, we could start with you.
I think, one of the main things that you have to really kind of figure out is why you're doing, why you're starting something. It is a harder path. It's not like, I go work at, GM or Google or one of these big companies. It's going to be the same as starting anything, whether it's a private company or a nonprofit or otherwise. So I think you just have to enter it with that view, because I think it's really, you're going to miss expectations if you think you can kind of get a lot of different things. So for that, for me, I know my life is just organized in a way where I only do 2 things. I do my company and I have my family. And really, I don't do anything else. And I've been like that as long as I can remember from early on. And I think it's, the Komal example of, staying after when I had a kid. One of the reasons I think I felt I was a successful partner at YC was I just put in more time. I literally did more office hours than other partners. I don't think my opinions are necessarily that much better. And then I think when you take it to this third company, or even going back first and second company, you just have to put in a lot more work. And so the ideal setup is the work gives you emotional satisfaction. Because if it doesn't, then it's very, very hard, right? And so if you don't do that, then maybe it's not for you. And I think one of the things that we don't often talk about is, starting a company isn't for everybody. I think particularly though in our communities, both Muslims and Muslim women in particular, specifically, I think it's generally more of us should be starting companies. I think more like a default is we say we shouldn't, and somehow the message weirdly resonates that we shouldn't. And so for this community, I would say no, start companies. But I would say generally speaking, it's not for everybody, because I do think like within our community, you already face a lot of uphill battles. There's already like a certain toughness that you're just inheriting by being who you are. And so therefore, I think you're kind of better suited for the ups and downs and the nonlinear kind of trajectory of starting a company. But in terms of specifically around burnout, and how do you have stamina for the long haul. Perspective is important. Who you're working with, they should give you energy and they shouldn't drain energy. And I think that's always, whether that's a co-founder or early employees or whatever that might be, your investors, those should be additive relationships rather than destructive or taxing, I should say. And that ultimately ends up creating an environment that you can do for a long time. I mean, I can tell you, this company, the third company, I feel, though I work just as much as YC and at Google, in stack ranking, Google was the hardest for me. Just in terms of, it was just emotionally the most draining. I was successful and was promoted. The whole time I worked for a woman by the name of Jen Fitzpatrick, who still runs Google Maps. She's a fantastic manager. But the way that a large company works is you can work 7 days a week and it's actually not enough, because there's these Maps at the time was 3,000 engineers. This is a huge organization. And I think I was always, because it wasn't my thing, I was always kind of uncomfortable that we could do more to do this, we put more to do this, we do more, and the list never ends. So you do have to recognize, and so whereas in my own company, I can modulate that actually, because it's my company, and then I'm setting also a role model and an example for others. YC was easy because I think investing is easy. It's nothing like starting a company or working at a company. But I think you just have to kind of, if you're starting something with the upside, there are the costs, and the best way to deal with those costs is you're just built for that stuff because it's who you are, and you surround yourself with people who are going to support that experience. I mean, I can tell you my own example with my wife and I. She was previously a founder herself. And so even, when getting married, I know to some degree that she's going to understand what the life that I've signed up for. This is, 10 years ago, life that I signed up for. And that's never been a tension in our household, where I think that can be a tension if you don't have those conversations and those expectations are not set. Like, it's not a coincidence I married another founder. Like, I don't like, it could be random, man. But it's certainly, I remember thinking like, and it wasn't like, I'm marrying this person because it's good for my career, but it certainly makes it easier. And so knowing these like puzzle pieces and how to kind of organize these puzzle pieces in the best way possible. One of the reasons, whether it's YC or being in the Bay Area broadly, is really good for startups is you're around other people who are going through the same thing. And so you just realize it's not just my personal experience. There's something I remember reading a long time about psychology, where you tend to, these mental health issues oftentimes are related to the fundamental belief that, you're the most important thing in the world. And having perspective actually makes everything a lot easier. And so that other people are experiencing this, it's not just you, and witnessing other people gone through that, I think makes the whole process easier. So that's my other kind of tip, is you surround yourself with people who not only support you, but maybe have also done these things with you. So they can very clearly say like, oh, what you're experiencing is not that unique. And I think that just helps you get through it, but it is a harder path. Now, the long-term upside is, you run the company, you have an impact on communities and societies. And if there's only one thing that everybody remembers, as I said at the beginning, it's like ownership is the difference. I do think it's a disservice to a lot of our I think our parents, they just didn't know better, to be very honest. I think they come in and they say, be an engineer, be a doctor. I think they don't know better. And that's the best that they can think of. But I think, we being kind of the next generation, I think the point really has to be along the lines of ownership is the thing. Ownership is the thing. That is the thing that has a much larger outsized impact. And it might be something as small as owning a small business. That's completely fine. But ownership is much better than being an employee, because you control the destiny of yourself, your family, and the community much more as being the owner than than not. So that's kind of the big message I've really pushed forward. And I think in one way we're not in complete disadvantage because so many of our extended families are in small businesses, and so they get that. I remember when I was driving from Chicago to the Bay Area to start my second company, I was talking to my dad on this like road trip, and I was like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. And he was like, well, you're like a Harvard educated, engineer, like get over it. Like roughly that was his point. He was like, imagine moving to from Pakistan when you're 40 with 3 kids, you don't know the language and you have no marketable skills. Like that's much more difficult. And it was like very sobering to hear that, because you feel like this is really hard. So, well, actually that's way harder, relatively speaking, that's way harder because, and so I think getting perspective, being in a community, that's what's particularly good about the Bay Area. It's particularly good about YC and things like YC or organizations, like Muslim Women in Tech or Muppies, just to show that the pattern isn't as unique to you. And that actually somehow makes it more bearable when the times are tough. But the other side, I think, is worth it. So I say continue and push through it. It's important. If ultimately, if the only thing you end up being is a role model, that's still worth it, I think. Which I don't think we should have this expectation that if you don't, have a big outcome, financial or otherwise, that it wasn't worth it. I think that's probably an incorrect expectation as well.
So you talked about the first things you said is you work on your family or your company, and I think that was really valuable for our audience to hear, because I think it's about priorities, right? It's about what you put as your 1, 2, 3. Now, how much you work on those priorities will change depending on where you are in the stages of your life, et cetera. But your priorities should be that North Star, right? And and if it's your company, if you're not yet running a company and it's the work that you do, whatever that is, making the priorities very clear. Yusuf and I met very early in life. I was 16 when I met him. He drove a Mustang. How could I say no? And so we married when I was 19. So is that the best route to go? There's other people who won't marry till their 30s or their 40s. There's others who won't marry at all because they have other opportunities in life. I think the key here is live life fully, and at every point, know what your priorities are and keep those priorities in mind as you do your work. I was a chief education officer, doing very well, had a dozen or so direct reports, and a wonderful opportunity to impact education in the state of Illinois. And doing it after a couple of years, Yusuf said to me, I know what your dream is. You love what you're doing, but you still have a dream you haven't started to work on. Isn't it time you do it now? And so, yeah, the choices we make of the people we surround ourselves with is the most important choice. And Qasar said, who you surround yourself with. What I tell our kids is surround yourself with those who make you better in every way, whether if it's your faith in your creator, the way you practice life, or the people who are your friends, or the person you choose to marry. These are the most important decisions in your life. When you can make those decisions well, the other things will be hard, but you will have your peeps around you to help you through it. And that's really, really key. It's the people around you that will help you.
The one thing I would say in terms of prioritization and just not getting burned out is I would, it's worked well for me. So I don't know if it works for everybody, but I basically cut out everything else. And I think maybe people look at that as like a very boring existence, but all the way to, I've never been on, I'd say that the 2 best decisions I made in my life is I've never been on Twitter, I've never been on Instagram, but like it's just that noise, and it's not particularly picking on those platforms, but I think, just what you consume, like from the moment you wake up to you go to sleep, like whether it's on your phone or, in media or whatever, I think does have a huge impact. And so I think, but my company, I obviously spend a lot of time with folks in my company. And I think the thing that I often get feedback from people is like, it's amazing that you do nothing else. And it's, yeah, I do nothing else. And I think that, but it's not for everybody. But actually, I don't feel rushed or panicked in my life. I don't feel overwhelmed, even though I work a lot, because I'm not doing other things. I literally, even like leaving Sunnyvale, I don't leave Sunnyvale. Those simple things, I think have had a huge and long-term effect. So I think another way of putting that is focus, right? So focus is really, really important, because you just can't do many things well. So just pick a couple of things, or one thing ideally, and then just pour time into that thing, and then you'll still actually have time for yourself and mental health and relaxing and like sleeping, enough sleep and eating correctly and those things. Because yeah, if you try to do all those things, you're gonna have a just miserable existence, and somehow that's not, that's not worth it as well. Yeah.
Great. I don't know, Imani or and if you had any thoughts before we went into Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in our first, so we're bootstrapped. So our first 3 to 4 years, we didn't take a salary till year 4. So we were doing Launchpad full time and then a part-time job. It was like that type of focus. I don't remember movies came out. I don't have any sense of like what was going on, but I do know that there are 2 things that really kept me grounded in those first 3 years. The first thing is I had a 6 to 9 no tech rule. So at any point, I have no idea what's happening in the world between 6 to 9. You can't get a hold of me. And it was just it also helped that my mom expected us to be home at dinner at 6 o'clock. And so from 6 to 9, that was my way to completely unplug from anything and just be with family for those few hours. I mean, it was radical. It's such a simple practice, but it really went a long way in terms of just that information diet. And then the other thing that I found that was very helpful was I worked out about 3 times a week, just 3 times a week, nothing more, nothing less, 30 minutes, 3 times a week for 30 minutes. Especially there's times where you feel like everything is going wrong, everything's horrible. And then you work out, you're like, oh, okay, like this is not so bad. So working out was that like shift in perspective that you needed, and that little bit of that sort of physical and mental sort of pep talk for you to keep going. But I think we sometimes overestimate the importance of these rituals to really kind of keep you grounded when everything else is going haywire.
Yeah, so I definitely used to believe what Qasar is saying about the one thing, be maniacally focused on this one thing. And 90% of my life was Copia. Like, I don't know where Komal stopped and Copia started, and when Copia stopped and Komal, I mean, it was just so inherently integrated. And as like beautiful as that might seem, it can also be wildly destructive. Like, yes, it has to be a top priority, and it can also be your number one priority, but like there has got to be something else. There has to be, like, you have to have a hobby or like an outlet, whether it's the gym, I mean, I don't have kids, but like maybe for some people it's kids. Maybe it's playing pickleball. Maybe it's like whatever it is, but you have to have something else that is like your kind of escape from that. And so for me too, I've realized like what do they tell you when you get on a plane? You have to put on your own oxygen mask before you help anyone else, right? And so being a founder requires you to put on that oxygen mask and like know that I've for so long in my career been self-sacrificial. Like, let's do whatever's in the best interest of the company. And like, it doesn't matter what happens, everything in the best interest of the company. And it's just, if you don't take care of you, ain't nobody else gonna take care of you. Like, everyone's in it for the company. Like, so you have to be also in it for yourself, right? And so that requires a few things. So like a few things that I've done differently now is, one, I meditate, which a lot of people say it's not like I've used those apps once a day. If you don't have 5 minutes a day that you can just like breathe, get away from everything and just breathe, got to question what you're doing with your day. So that I try to do at least one day, which is like technology free, like a Saturday, or like a good chunk on a Saturday or Sunday that's like I'm off. And I'm likely going to water and just like cleansing my brain. 2, I got a therapist, which was excellent. I think that mental health is a really taboo thing to talk about in Muslim culture. But a therapist, like, I will never not have a therapist. They are so fantastic to just talk out loud with. I also have an executive coach. One thing that really shifted like my entire brain and my mentality is I started writing in a gratitude journal. So every night, regardless of how I felt, regardless of how many times I got pummeled in the face that day, I will write down before I go to bed, after a face show, before I go to bed, 5 things I'm specifically grateful for. And, especially on those really hard, really awful days where it feels like nothing is going your way, to just pause and like actually identify 5 things that you are grateful for. Maybe it's the flow of the pen, maybe it's the comfort of your bed, maybe it's like that person went above and beyond and help me finish this part. Like whatever it is, you can identify it. And then that like optimism of seeing like, okay, even on my even on my worst day, there are so many things to be grateful for. It kind of changes your overall mental psychology. So gratitude journal, I mean, attitude of gratitude is so critical, and something also I've embedded in my company. And then I also agree with the people. You are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. 5 people, average. So like you got to be judicious about who's your inner circle. Right? You got to cut the cellulite. You got to recognize the cellulite. You got to cut the cellulite. Like, ain't nobody. This is not. You know, what I see is like if A players, like A hires, like decide to get, let's say, B+ hires. Well, those B+ hires are going to be hiring the next generation of employees at your company who are going to maybe accept B- or C+, and it's like all downhill from there, right? So you want to surround yourself with the best of the best. Like Dilara said, you know, the people who just make you better. And it doesn't mean like you should only surround yourself with like founders or entrepreneurs, that can also be, you know, but to make sure you are judicious about the people who are feeding you energy, because you're giving so much energy out for the company that you like need to be fed with energy. So like in my life, like everything has to be super easy, because this is like what requires my most mental energy.
Cool. And I guess, did everyone speak? I think Aman, did you want to share anything on that?
I'm just making notes from all the words of brilliance and wisdom, but I think it all boils down to setting the structures for yourself and for everyone around you. So even when it comes to the company, knowing what the communication protocol is, I don't want to be called at like 11 p.m. for instance, just setting those standards in place. Don't want to add anything else, but I'm just learning from everyone, to be honest. Burnout does hit, and I feel like my body feels it more than my brain does at times, and I start falling sick frequently. So now I know what my limit is, so try to kind of stay far away from it as possible.
I also think that passion is kind of a falsehood. Like, you know, people always comment on how passionate I am about Copia. And frankly, I'm not passionate about Copia at all. Like, flames of passion can be extinguished when you confront inevitable obstacles and failures. So passion is not enough. You need to be more than passionate. You need to be hungry. Passion is what gets you started, but it's that hunger that keeps you going. And hunger is that insatiable drive to achieve something that is greater and bigger than yourself. And so I think, you know, Qasar mentioned, like, you need to know your why. You also need to know, like, with everything going on in the world right now, like, what are you hungry for? What are you hungry for that you're going to be dedicating yourself to? So, and then the last part I have is just that, you know, it's kind of like it's impossible to go through life, to be a founder without failing. Like, it is just part of it. You are going to fall, you're going to stumble, there are false starts, there are wrong, it is what it is. But like Rocky reminds us, life isn't about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. It's, you got to have to think about that like mental grittiness. You can't be afraid of failure, because that's just inevitable. And yeah.
Fantastic. We've received a lot of questions in the chat and also pre-submitted questions. So I just want to quickly, and I know we've added a lot of structure to this, if there's any advice, general advice, any of the panelists would like to give the audience that you've really been itching to give, but none of the prompts allowed you to include it in your answer. And I'm not going to have everyone answer, but whoever's really, really passionate about sharing something, it could be a quick 5-second book plug or like a class or something like that. Is there any general advice you'd really like to share right now?
I have a piece of advice.
Go first. Go.
And then I have an ask. So my piece of advice is, you know, we look around the world right now and everything is moving so fast. If you study world history, they're like first 4 billion years, nothing happened. And in the last 200 years, everything seems to have happened. In the last 5 years, Too much seems to have happened. And I guess my advice is be merciful to yourself, be kind to yourself and the people around you. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. You will get to all the things that you want to do. You rush them too fast, you hurt yourself and you hurt the people around you. So I just sometimes want to say that to myself. I have to say it to myself in the mirror, and I want to say it to the people around me. Let's be kind to ourselves and to those around us. Mercy is, I think, God's greatest gift to us. But God also asks us to have mercy on ourselves and each other. So don't forget that. Don't forget that. And my ask is, hey, I'm not a founder if I'm not going to ask you to join me. So I just put in the chat, vpeer.com. If you run a network of professionals, people, community, etc., or you're part of one, join vPeer as a network. We have thousands of people who are connecting with each other. And alhamdulillah, Amani talked about this. We didn't realize this would happen. There are a lot of Muslim networks. And so you can also see each other across networks in the Muslim community. And so this is a really cool place. We think that we can build a platform where people are growing in their profession and in their craft and in their personhood. Join us at vpeer.com.
I think I still remember this. You said it's a marathon. You're 100% right, Delara. I remember Qasar said this too once, and he was like, "Yes, it is 100% a marathon. You're just sprinting through it, And but my actual piece of advice is, so many people along my journey have said, "Come on, Komal, solving hunger, reducing food waste." Like a venture-backed company that's going to take leftover food and give it to poor people and somehow make money off of that. That is impossible. To which I now respond with the words of the late and great Muhammad Ali. Impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who prefer to live in a life as it is instead of using the power they have to challenge it, to change it, to improve it. Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing. The impossible does not exist. They can no longer exist. We can't tolerate a world where we waste 3 times more food than there are mouths to feed. We will not tolerate it. And so for me, I guess it's a little bit more subtle of an ask is like, one thing I want you to realize is like one woman with a simple idea can make a world of a difference, but a group of people banded together can rid the world of one of the most unnecessary and solvable problems, right? For us, what we call the world's dumbest problem. So I also have something in the chat, and then I'll share my LinkedIn in case any of you guys want to reach out.
Yeah, I'll just add a final thought, or maybe not a final thought, which is if you are thinking of becoming an entrepreneur or you're kind of on the fence about it, I would say to just really give yourself space to figure it out, right? This idea of having a growth mindset. I mean, 7 years ago, if you asked me what an angel investor was, what my customer acquisition costs were, what's your runaway, I didn't know any of these terms, right? And I think a lot of times we think of the journey to come and think of where we are and we sort of get stuck there. But really giving yourself space to figure it out as you go. There's some tough decisions. I remember once we over forecasted and I had to let people go because we made a decision that was not accurate, right? We didn't do the right assumptions. We didn't take a more conservative approach, and that was tough, but I had to forgive myself about that decision in terms of just what it led to and the outcomes for others. And I would say the other thing to keep in mind is if we just sort of take it back to thinking of, the prophet, when overnight he had to become a political and social and spiritual leader, he himself too had to evolve into that role, right? So if he had to grow into it, what about you, right? I think that's something to keep in mind, is that you'll eventually grow into it. Maybe you're not where you are right now, but having that mindset that you'll figure it out, and you're not going to figure it out all today, but you eventually will, does make that a little bit easier, makes it seem a little bit less overwhelming.
And there is no sexiness in being an entrepreneur. It is over glamorized. People think it's like Forbes things and you're on, like you're speaking at TechCrunch, like none of this. That is like, if that's part of your life, it's 0.001% of your life. Like if you're doing it for that, like you'll quit for sure. Cause it's not worth it. it's not worth it. So it is not, I think it's, especially when you're in the Silicon Valley, you're just like, everyone's starting a startup. Like in New York, everyone's in finance. Like you can't, I don't know. I just wouldn't start it for the sake of just starting something if you weren't passionate about it or you didn't really truly care about it. And it's not a problem that you see or you experience yourself. And then if you're doing it for the glitz and the glamour and the press, like you will fail. Inevitably, you will fail.
And with that, unless I think I'm on, if you have anything extra to share, I know you put something in the chat.
A quick thing, I think we should also be okay with experimenting with like against traditional forms. So for instance, we've done engineering is all based in Pakistan right now, and then we're hiring immigrants, recent immigrants with years of experience in the sustainability industry. Just being open to trying out different models and hiring people from like where you wouldn't normally look is also an interesting thing to venture out to. Other than that, just resiliency is key. That's what I'm learning these days.
With that, thank you so much to the panelists. I can't even express how happy I am. The impact of events like this, I know, change life trajectories for people, people that you might not ever see, and you might see them 20 years down the line. I know my life was changed for a small event like this because some folks like yourself took up the time to share their journeys. So I definitely want to thank you all and thank Muslim Women in Technology for allowing us to team up and have this event. And then the Muppies team as well, who are not on video right now, but spent a lot of work to help put this event on. Again, if anyone's interested in learning more about Muppies and connecting with other professionals, you can go to muppies.org, or you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook. And then I'm going to hand it off to Safa and Sarah.
Awesome. Yeah, just to reiterate what Sadiq said, thank you guys so much for your time and our amazing panelists. I'm personally very inspired hearing your stories, and we'll keep up with your companies and all the great things you guys will do. And yeah, just want to reiterate, it's been awesome hearing from you guys. And yeah, all the ladies on this chat and also any allies, Muslim Women in Technology is a growing community. We're here to support you guys in your advancement in STEM careers. Check us out on our website. We'll post the link. And then Sarah, Sadiq, and I will be hanging out after this call is over if you guys have any questions. And yeah, thank you guys so much. And we hope everyone stays healthy and safe before the elections. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.
I think Sarah is saying something, but unmute.
Oh, awesome. You're unmuted now. Sorry, are you muted? Let's see.
Join us for our next event and follow us on our social media. I know Qasar said he kind of blocks out Instagram and Twitter. But yeah, that would be my last request.
As an attendee, this was great. Thank you for putting it on.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Ismail. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Smile. It's always nice seeing your face, man.
Likewise. Also, do we have the glasses? Are these they're Felix Gray computer glasses?
I'm not sure, but I like them.
Okay. All right.
Oh, man. But yeah, so Ismail is also active in the nonprofit space as well. So it's always nice to see someone, even though if they're not organizing an event, to take out the time. So I really do appreciate his smile, and it puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, thanks so much for always supporting our events. I know I've seen you around at previous events, Ismail. Really appreciate it.
Of course. I mean, I'm getting value out of it. And thank you for putting it on.
Yeah,
yeah, and then also, sorry, do other folks want to talk to, or?
Yeah, go for it.
So, Sadiq, you're with Muppies in DC, but I think you're from Chicago, right?
Correct. Yep, that's right.
Are you out here nowadays?
I'm in Chicago nowadays, but I'll probably be moving to DC and when COVID kind of simmers down. That's kind of the state of affairs.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Right. And then on the Muppies Chicago team, we had a kind of, it's like we got a parallel trade. Larry from the DMV area is back in DC, but is a member of our team in Chicago.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happened. Yusuf Kadir is actually the one who mentioned it happening in the first place. So yeah, a bit of a trade. Yeah, it's cool. It's been fun so far. DC's definitely not like the Chicago team, but you know, they have their own flavor, and it's been fun putting on events.
How about so the other folks on the line are, I know we like anchored this to Central Time. I'm assuming some of us are in Chicago as well. Cool.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Now it works. Yeah, Safa and I are both Chicago as well. I don't know if that was obvious. I don't know who else is on here though.
I think we're down to.
As well.
All right, so I think we're probably going to be ending this now. Thank you guys for anyone who's left. Feel free to reach out to us on our social media, LinkedIn, anything like that. But have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Take care. Salam.
Bye, take care.